Is it worth going to a 9mm snub nose revolver versus a 357 Magnum? And today what we're going to test is our Hornady critical duty ammunition. Now, admittedly, Hornady critical duty is not really a short barreled load, and you can see I'm using short barreled handguns today. So to test the 357 Magnum, I am going to use my Taurus 605 with a 2-inch barrel and my Taurus 905 with a 2-inch barrel to test the 9mm. So this should be a pretty fair comparison because we're using essentially identical firearms, and the bullet weights of these are both 135 grains. So 135 grain 9mm plus P, 135 grain 357 Magnum. So our 9mm, we are rated at 1,070 feet per second. I believe that's to a 4-inch barrel. And our 357 Magnum, we are rated at 1,275 feet per second. I'm not sure what barrel length we're using to get that velocity that Hornady's using. So I often hear a lot of people say, well, it's not really worth going to a 357 Magnum because when you go in a short barrel, 9mm is just as powerful. So this should be a really easy way to tell if that's true with ammo like this. Both have 135 grain bullets. So we're going to go through the chronograph, see what kind of velocity and accuracy we get at the same time. Then I'm going to do my 10% clear ballistic gel test. So we're going to go into 10% plain 10% clear ballistics, no denim in the way or anything like that to clog a hollow point, and see what kind of expansion and we get and penetration, all of that with our best possible potential, just plain clear ballistics. And then after that, we'll move on to a real world simulation where I'm going to have 4 layers of denim on this first 3-inch piece that represents our pectoral muscle. After that, we're going to have a 1/4-inch medium density fiberboard right here to represent hitting ribs or sternum, 16 more inches of clear ballistics, and then another 1/4-inch medium density fiberboard at the back of that, 16-inch blocks to represent hitting back ribs. So 3 inches and 16 inches, but clear ballistics is roughly a half representation of flesh, so it's more like 1.5 inches and 8 inches of the density of flesh. So it's like we're trying to simulate a 9.5-inch individual there. So we'll do a plain clear ballistic shot, then a real world simulation shot with those. Then I will shoot at the steel target, see what kind of practical accuracy I can get with these, and especially shootability, because 357 Magnum and a snub has quite a bit of recoil, and I want to see if it's near impossible to do like people say, or if the 9mm is like 10 times easier like people say. So let's get started with this test. All right, first up we have our 9mm. This is a 135 grain rated at 1,070 feet per second. And by the way, the measurement from the back of the cylinder to the muzzle is 3.6 inches. So it's equivalent to a 3.6-inch semi-auto. So to put that in perspective, a Glock 26 is, I think, 3.43 inches. But then we have a little bit of cylinder gap here. So anywhere between 2 and 5% gas loss. So in the cylinder gap. But let's see what we get here. See how close we get to 1,070 feet per second. 1,028. 1,034, 1,024, 1,006, 983. So, not terrible compared to its rated velocity. So pretty good for being such a short barrel. Now 357 Magnum, same bullet weight, 135 grain. A lot of people were saying that, we're not going to get any velocity increase with this out of such a short barrel versus 9mm. So I don't make up those statements. I'm just relaying them back to you guys. So let's see if we get over that, about 1,000 feet per second with our 357 mag. $12.33, $12.30. That's obviously an error read. I don't know why it picked up 1826. That's not right. 1,200. 1243. So, 200 feet per second more on a 135 grain bullet is not nothing. So I think when people are saying that, they don't exactly know what they're talking about. One thing I noticed about this though, I didn't see any flash at all. So it's a really good powder, in my opinion, for a short barrel. I didn't see any excessive flash or anything. So, and the recoil wasn't that excessive either. So felt really good out of the Snub. So let's hit our ballistics gel block and see how these compare. All right, our first shot in the plain clear ballistics. No denim in the way to clog a hollow point. These are flex tips, so you know they are filled in FTX bullets, so they're likely never going to clog with denim or anything like that. But that's my my protocol, is to do a shot in the plain clear ballistics. Our best potential, no denim in the way to clog a hollow point, no rib simulation to slow down penetration. So let's see what we get here with our 9mm. All right. So that was our 357 Magnum. Let's go take a look. All right, so a little bit different performance there, but still pretty similar, just more damage with our 357. So our 9mm on bottom, our 357 mag on top. A little more energy dump with our 357 Magnum. And going into the block here, just a little bit more with our 357 Magnum. And even though the bullet stopped at about the same penetration, the 9mm went just a little bit deeper. I think it's probably expanded a little bit less, but we went right to 19 inches with our 9mm. So not too much over penetration and pretty good damage going on in there. Our 357 Magnum, a lot more damage, and we went to 18¼ inches. So just a 3/4 inch difference there, with just a little bit more going on with our 357 Magnum. But you know, the recoil was substantially more. Not double or anything like that, but maybe 30% more. So let's put on our denim, put it in our rib simulations, and see how these compare in our real world simulation. All right, our real world simulation, 4 layers of denim followed by 3 inches of clear ballistics to represent hitting our pectoral muscle. After that, a 1/4 inch medium density fiberboard to represent hitting ribs or sternum. 16 more inches of clear ballistics and another 1/4 inch medium density fiberboard to represent back ribs. So let's see how our 9mm does. Let me set that back up and we'll hit it with the 357 Magnum. All right, 357 Magnum real world simulation. Let's see what this does. Let's go take a look. So that's very interesting. They both wanted to start yawing quite a bit. And our penetration is very, very similar with these, but there's definitely a difference in energy dump and all of that. So this one we have to really take a close-up look at, because some of this tumbling damage with a 9mm would, you know, indicate expansion damage, but that's not what's going on. And looking at our first 3 inches, we can see that our 9mm on the bottom, our 357 mag on top. So our 9mm was severely affected by that fabric, even though there's a plug in there, which is interesting, because through plain gel it had a bunch of energy dump, but just denim there, it didn't. So that's kind of interesting that that plug didn't help it with that. Now with the 357 Magnum, we have more energy dump than the 9mm. And here's where we want to focus here, is on this first part here. See right here, when we first go into this block, there's just a straight line with our 9mm. But with our 357 Magnum, there's a whole bunch of tearing damage and energy dump right there. And then we start tumbling with our 9mm, which created a pretty good damage amount there. So our rib simulation, our 9mm went in here, just poked a hole through. Our 357 Magnum was definitely expanded, kind of a weird expansion. But it was definitely more expanded than that 9mm. So We are cutting along this whole path with our 357. With our 9mm, we're just tumbling right here. And it looks like both of these hit the back rib simulation. And both of them just left a little dent. Our 9mm left a little dent. Our 357 Magnum left a little dent. So with our 9mm, we went to 19 inches, right where that back block stops, and there was absolutely no expansion of that bullet. It's kind of weird. And our 357 Magnum also went to 19 inches and stopped right against that rib simulation. But there's some really good expansion. Not really great, but they're, you know, better than the 9mm. So it's very interesting how they designed this. So it looks like they designed it to pretty much go as deep in an average individual as possible without passing through. So that's a good design in that aspect. But when going down to a short barrel, even though this 9mm probably works on a 5-inch or 4.5-inch pistol just fine, when we go down to a short barrel that's equivalent to a 3.6-inch semi-auto, you know, and we would get probably the same velocity out of, you know, 3.1, 3.2, 3.3-inch pistols as well. The 9mm just doesn't cut it. But our 357 Magnum, it's continuing to do pretty well. So interesting overall. Our 357 Magnum definitely did a lot better. And what people were saying, you know, you gain nothing by going to 357. I'm not seeing that here. So let's pull these out of the block. We'll take a close-up look at them, then I'll shoot our steel, see what kind of practical accuracy and shootability I can get with these. All right, so here's a close-up look at these bullets going through plain gel, our 9mm and our 357 Magnum. So our 9mm got pretty good expansion through our plain gel shot. You can see they use a cannular down there to band that bullet to the core. So it's not a bonded bullet, it is a banded bullet though, which essentially is the same thing. A 357 Magnum appears to it has more expansion. And these are definitely different bullet designs. When they were unfired, they were completely different looking, different ogive angles and all of that. So a little bit better with our 357 versus our 9mm in plain gel. And when we go through our real world simulation, this is where everything changes. Our 9mm and our 357 Magnum. So our 9mm, no expansion at all, which is interesting because, you know, my thought was that plug would, you know, push right through that fabric, but based on that energy dump in the first 3 inches, that didn't do what it was supposed to do, really. Our 357 Magnum, though, we continue to get good expansion. It's a little bit smaller than through the plain gel here, but still pretty good. I would say it looks bigger than our 9mm through plain gel, or about the same size. So that extra velocity definitely played a part in this, because, you know, this is typically what I see with rounds that are kind of on the edge of enough velocity. And then putting in that snub nose, yeah, it's just not quite enough velocity there. As we're at the 357 Magnum, you got a couple of 100 feet per second extra. It takes care of all that. It's, you know, there's no problem at all. So honestly, really good performance with our 357 Magnum, even though I've seen bigger expansion and all of that. Most of the time, even with loads that are meant for short barrels, I see 357 Magnum have massive fireballs and heavy recoil. As where this did not have any of that. I didn't see any heavy recoil or feel any heavy recoil. I didn't see any fireballs. I didn't see any unburnt powder on that first 3-inch piece. So even though this is supposed to be like duty size handgun ammo, it honestly performed like short barrel ammo in my opinion. So I would say it's a pretty good snub nose load for our 357 Magnum, and it has a harder, you know, core than typical, so it'll actually bust through windshields and metal a little bit better than a lot of rounds. As for this, you definitely have some better options for a snub nose 9mm. So that's a close-up look at those. All right, 14 yards from the target, so I'm gonna get a front sight picture, fire these shots as fast as I think I can and still hit the target, then do a reload. So There's two significant differences here between these. One is the 357 Magnum definitely had more recoil. And the other thing is, you know, our reloads are quite a bit different. I prefer the speed loader for revolver cartridges rather than like a speed strip. And then we have a moon clip for our 9mm here. So I'm going to see if there's a huge difference in my ability to hit the target, and also with, you know, my ability to do some reloads. So a lot of people say the moon clip's a little bit easier. So I'm just going to set this right here in my pocket where I can reach it. Fire off 5 shots, do a reload with the moon clip, fire off 5 more. And I'm not an expert at this. I'm just an everyday guy trying to reload these things. You know, I don't use moon clips a lot. So 9mm, let's see how I can do with this. Looks like I pulled one over the target there. Those flex tips have a little bit of an issue with reloading. They don't drop right in. They're kind of like pencil erasers, so when they hit that, you know, it's hard to drop that moon clip with that ammo in it because you don't have really anything to grab onto. So our 357 Magnum here, I'm gonna do that same thing. I'm gonna set my reload here in my pocket where I can easily reach it. Fire off 5 rounds, do a reload, fire off 5 more. The biggest issue with this is going to be that extra recoil because it's quite a bit more. So let's see how I do this. So that recoil got me right away with pulling a shot over the target. And then I realized right away that I had to kind of slow that down. As we're at the 9mm, right away it wasn't a problem. So, you know, in a self-defense situation, I could see how maybe that 9mm might be a little bit better to have because I had to think about it a little bit less. Now, reloading this was actually faster, but part of that is I think I got lucky because when I dropped that speed loader, I just coincidentally, they went directly in without, you know, misalignment. So I was able to actually do it faster with this, as where with the 9mm, it was kind of bad luck where they didn't align and I had to twist it a little bit. So a little bit of a difference there, but one thing I could say, this gun is quite a bit hotter to the touch than this was after firing. So let me back it up and see how these shoot from just a little more distance. All right, 40 yards from the target. I just want to see if I can hit from this distance. Kind of far for snub nose revolvers and these calibers. I can usually do it easier with like 38 special because the recoil's less and I don't really think too much. But when you get the cartridges like this with 357 Magnum, a little bit of flinch comes into play. And then with the 9mm, nothing really ever shoots point of aim with this. So it's going to be a challenge from 40 yards, I would think. So 9mm, let's see how I can do with this. That one shot over the target. I'm thinking these are definitely shooting a little bit high. Yeah, all those are shooting extremely high. I see that with every single round I fire through this. I don't know why. Like the last hits I made, I was aiming like 2 feet below the target, and the ones I missed were going way over the target, and I was just aiming center mass with that. So yeah, I noticed that in the semi-auto caliber revolvers, they all kind of do that for some reason. Now our 357 Magnum, see what I can do with this. I think these are shooting a little bit to the left for me. You may have noticed I have these Zeta 6 J clips. These are actually pretty nice. They actually do fit quite well enough that they easily load, a lot easier than a speed strip. So those are great options as well. I'll keep going here. So to make those hits, I was aiming on the right edge of that target. So yeah, a little bit different here in our point of impact. So the thing that stands out above all else is that the 357 Magnum is just more straightforward. You know, you put ammo in it, you shoot it, you eject it out. The 9mm, you gotta, well, you can just put ammo in it, but then when you hit the ejector, they won't come out. So you got to spend some time loading your moon clips, and you got to buy some good moon clips because the provided ones are usually not very good. So you got to put them in there, and then, you know, deal with these all day. But I guess for the person that's really invested in 9mm, and they have a lot of 9mm, you know, it might cost them essentially nothing to buy a 9mm revolver because of the ammo, because they already have it. Let's say they want to shoot thousands of rounds and they already have that ammo that they bought 10 years ago at a discount. So if they're going to go and buy this, you know, $350 Taurus here, I could see that makes sense. As where, you know, people that don't do other calibers, you know, they're going to get a 357 and they want to buy the ammo, and then it's going to have a lot more recoil for them, you know, especially 9mm fanboys are not really going to want to go to a 357 Magnum Snub. I can just about guarantee that. Yeah, so different strokes for different folks, I guess. But honestly, what people are saying, though, that, you know, you don't really gain anything with the 357 Magnum, you lose most of it, that's completely nonsense, because we saw here like a 200 feet per second gain with the same bullet weight. Yes, it comes at a cost, probably 30% more recoil, but honestly, both of these had decent recoil, so it wasn't really painful to shoot this particular 357 Magnum ammo. I have shot painful 357 Magnum ammo out of a Snub, Lake Buffalo Bore. I've actually shot some of their 125 grain, and I was getting 1450 feet per second out of this, or out of this, which, you know, that's normally 4-inch barrel velocity. Normally a 125 grain out of this, you'll get 1200, 1250. I was getting 1450. That had a lot of painful recoil. But with this particular ammo, even though it's not designed for short barrel, it actually seems to be an efficient powder that's working well in short barrels. So with our terminal ballistics test, though, we had a complete failure with our real world simulation with the 9mm, but we still did well with the 357 Magnum. So 357 Magnum definitely did better in this test in a lot of different ways, you know, both with its terminal ballistics and with, you know, the point of impact and all of that, and the ease of use. So that's what you get today. So as always, comment, share, and like, and thanks for watching.